All right, are we ready to get started?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our agricultural breakout session again. For those that don't know, my name is James Hansen. I work for Mother Lode Job Training in Central Sierra Economic Development District. Happy to put this on. And so today's session is going to be with the Amador Resource Conservation District. And we have Amanda Watson and Anna Mariscal of the Amador Resource Conservation District, and they're going to be presenting on the Amador RCD. And so I'll be happy to turn it over to them to share what it is they have to share with us today.
Yeah, awesome. Well, again, my name is Amanda Watson. I work with the Amador Resource Conservation District. And today I'm actually wanting to give some background about what a resource conservation district is, what are our kind of core values, and some of our obstacles. But what I'm really hoping is that we can have a dialogue to hear back from y'all in the audience and have a conversation about those kind of similar topics for you guys, and that so we can start gathering some of that information as it relates to ag and ag regulations we've talked about, ag viability, and programs and projects that the resource conservation typically integrates with. So I'm going to have a couple questions for you later. I have a couple of questions for you now. So I'm going to read you the questions for later so you can be kind of marinating on them as we move through the conversation. So one of them, the first one is, what is your core value that you believe is essential within agricultural and natural resource landscape here in the Central Sierra region? When engaging with projects and programs on that landscape, what do you believe is important in the delivery of that to you or to your community? And then what is a significant challenge that you encounter when working with agricultural landscape in the Central Sierra? So actually, Anna's going to pass out some stuff. We have pens if you want to be ruminating on that while we go through kind of what the RCD perspective on that is. So I have a question for you. In the room, can I have people raise their hands for the organization that they're part of or what they're associated, what brings them here today? Who in the room is a state agency? All right, we got two, great. Any local county government? All right. Any nonprofits? Awesome, awesome. Any producers? Bummer, okay, no producers. Any tribes? All right. Any other private sector things that I didn't cover? All right, talked to you earlier. Awesome. My follow-up question to that is, do any of you know what resource conservation districts are? Can we get a show of hands? Got two in the back. Frank?
Yes, I do.
Come on, buddy. All right, yeah, so I'm going to just dive in a little bit of background of what a resource conservation district is. As you see, I don't have slides. This is our website. I really wanted this to be an active conversation instead of me running through some slides. So hopefully you guys are in the mindset after lunch to really have some conversation and dive into this stuff. So what a resource conservation district is, we are special districts of the government, which means we operate similar to like a fire department or a school district. Our boards are made up of local people that they have to actually live in the county. They have to be residents of the county in which they serve. They are sometimes voted in or appointed by the Board of Supervisors. They are pretty much mandated to have board meetings every week or every month. Every week, God, I would
Yikes.
jump off them. Most of them have meetings every month, and they are open to the public. You can go to their websites, check out their agendas, check out what's on there, and you can go and actually be part of that conversation. And I will tell you, in our region, a lot of these boards actually are wanting engagement, but the limited capacity to get out into the community, it's hard to do that. So if you do have something to bring to your RCD, you can check out the CARCD, California Association of Resource Conservation Districts website, carcd.org. Look up your local one, give me a call, and I can connect you to the point person. And their information's up there for you guys to check it out. It's all about transparency. They are a local district of the government, so they're held to those standards and want to do that. And so a little bit of background about resource conservation districts is that they were actually formed out of the Dust Bowl. When, famously giant dust clouds coming towards Washington, D.C., and the idea was to have local representation for farming communities about protecting soil health and protecting those natural resources. So as a branch, these grassroots local districts of the government were formed, and then we had the Soil Conservation Service formed, which then turned into the Natural Resource Conservation Service that we have today. And with that change, we had the focus on soil, and I would say that resource conservation districts and their mission has evolved past soil health, although soil health, as mentioned, in a couple other of the panels, which I love, is like that is the lifeblood of what we're talking about. Water, soil health, all of that comes up. Really is the interconnectedness that brings all these programs together when you're talking about natural resources and farming and ranching and our communities. So that is kind of a brief history about RCDs. I do also want to say there are some RCDs that get tax base, but it's very rare in California. There are resource conservation districts across the country, and all of them operate really independently and very differently. And for the most part, that's a great thing because they come out of what's needed in their community. It's the goal. But with that, having no tax base and no formal form of getting funding, and also being held to all the standards of a special district, ours is entirely grant funded. Most are entirely grant funded, and so with that comes a lot of challenges on how do we put ourselves in as a consistent representative of our rural communities, and even in some other RCDs, non-rural communities, to represent natural and working lands. And so some of our challenges, like I mentioned, we're grant dependent. Another piece is that we have program constraints. Because we're grant dependent, a lot of what our priorities might be, or we talk about, we hear from the community, we have to figure out how to maneuver those to fit into state and federal goals, so that our deliverables, our grants always tie back to that. Every hour of our day has to tie back to how are we getting that grant delivered. So that wiggle room to engage with the community and do some of that stuff that we can't get grant funding for is limited. So that's a constraint. And it also comes down to the constraint of how do we engage with producers, as Anna mentioned, on more of a systems approach, when she mentioned on the panel, on more of a systems approach of how can we help these producers be more profitable, work within those the ecosystem constraints and the community constraints and financial constraints, when we're looking at our goals are implementing a best management practice. And in the past, that's really what we've been able to do. We provide assistance to do hedgerow planting. We get grants through the Healthy Soils Program, which is a state initiative, and we provide some technical assistance. We get about $60,000 over 3 years to help a producer through that process. Not a single producer, many producers. Say that, as many as we can, right?
Across 4 counties.
Across 4 counties. So we are, how do we meaningfully make that make sense to a producer that's honestly taking a risk with looking at how to implement those practices? And so making that technical assistance meaningful, and that serves the community at large and meets state goals. So that's a huge constraint. The other piece that I'd like to say is identity drift. And what I mean by that is when you're grant funded and you are constantly having to figure out how you're going to pay for next year, it is really challenging to make sure you continue to stay on mission when you have outside forces telling you what you need to be doing. So soil health has always been foundational to resource conservation districts. And now we're trying to figure out, well, making sure that we can stay on message with the state of climate resiliency and sustainability and all of those punchy words that come up, and kind of shifting ourselves around what our main goal is, which is ag viability and soil health. So, and figuring out how to stay consistent and connected to our communities as those policies change or as leadership changes. So that's another big thing. Go for it, Anna.
As there's differences between the federal government and the state government of what they would like to see, And I think that's just really coming back to, if we know what you guys want, we can make that adapt. We can adapt that language to the language they need to hear.
Yep.
But if we don't know what you want, then our directive is coming from an outside entity that we don't feel will appropriately speak to our community's needs and desires, and the language that you guys want to see that would be impactful for yourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's one of the big things that I'm hoping to work with Mother Lode Job Training, the Central Sierra Business Economic Development District. Sorry, I'm usually pretty good at that. We are figuring out how to try to find alignment within our region. We've recognized that working regionally makes a lot of sense in our area. And so trying to find alignment regionally of how what is our role as resource conservation districts for being the voice and elevating the messages to local, state, and federal leadership, and being involved in developing those programs. And so some of our vision for the future, Anna mentioned that's a humongous piece of that, is policy influence. What is our position, like I said, to elevate those voices and be the catalyst to bring that together? The other piece is regional planning and coordination. We work with other resource conservation districts locally. We got a grant from the Department of Conservation to help bring together the voice, and we're going to be working on developing a natural working lands resiliency plan. And so through that, what we're hoping is to be bringing those voices to the table and trying to coalesce around what is our vision for the region, what are those gaps, what are the opportunities, so that we can be much more proactive in going out what we want, how we frame our programs we know we want to fit what the state's trying to give us, to fit what agencies are trying to give us. And I did the math the other day. I've written like $35 million worth of grants over the last 5 years. We've gotten like 33 million of it awarded in the region. Wow. So I'd like to say I'm fairly decent at writing grants, and it's really about creative writing. And so that's the thing. If we know, and we feel, I believe this really strongly, if we know what we need, we can then be in a really powerful place to make that story of why it makes sense to fund us. So that's really what we're hoping for.
And just to say is that I know that no one raised their hand as a producer in this room. Everyone's coming from different entities, but if you're working with landowners, if you are a landowner, if you are providing services to landowners, you're a resource to us as much as we would like to be a resource to you in trying to do some of that work that you're doing. And so, we're looking for partnership where people are interested in partnerships, so that we can really be like leveraging all these services that are existing in our community to have collective impact. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you're talking about broadband capacity and internet access, and those are, when most people think agriculture, they're not thinking of that as the resource that community would need. But I know I've lived in an area where we had the equivalent of dial-up internet trying to run, have rural industry, and you just cannot be competitive. You cannot scale out to get to a place that, like Justine's talking about, to be economically viable for yourself, right? So it's like, even no matter how fringe we think we are to one another, it's actually it's an integrated landscape. And as the RCD, being that grassroots, community-led, if people are engaging with our boards, if you're engaging with our staff, then we can truly be community-led and helping serve that integrated approach to the viability of our agricultural working landscape, as well as our natural resources viability and sustainability regionally.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the other pieces for our vision for the future, and this has been a running theme, I think, connective thread that I've heard a couple of some of my favorite words, but one that you know, I learned from a rancher down in Slough House, California, when I was first starting, and his thing he would always bring back is agricultural viability. So Jay Schneider we got along famously, did not agree on pretty much anything, but ag viability is something that we would always talk about and get behind together. And so that really for me is one of the core lenses that I look through on what is how do we get to a future and check these off. Oh no, I'm talking way too much. Okay, I wanna, the other piece is community-led planning. That's another piece that we feel really strongly about, but I wanna hear from you guys. So either write on your card, or if you want to, since we only have 10 minutes left, if you wanna we can run through and answer those questions. So I'm gonna repeat them for you. What is one core value you believe is essential within agricultural and natural working landscape in the Central Sierra region? Do you guys have any what is your core value for agricultural and natural working land?
Strong, skilled workforce.
Love it. That's on brand. Yeah.
Good management procedures.
Good management procedures. Love it.
Access.
Food system?
Yeah, for public use and yeah, access.
Right. Yeah, so when you say access, are you that's hugely broad and I actually love it. So access to foods, but also you're talking about the natural component of access to land.
The natural elements, the forest, the woods, making sure. So I guess I'm coming from, I live in one of those beautiful counties in California, but I can't access much of it.
Yeah.
Unless I'm driving on it.
And Frank, when you say management, would you say, when you're thinking that, do you think like best management practice implementation on the ground, or like management of an operation?
Management that incorporates conservation, protection of wildlife, but at the same time, fire safety, clear areas around the house, brushing, what have you, correct use of water. Just the whole thing, because so much has changed over the years from what it was to where it is now. And yet if you go back many years ago with the Native Americans and how they took care of the land, you see what a great job they did.
Yeah.
But would that pass CARB certification now? Probably not. You know, so how do you blend all that together in this new world and to make sure that you've got, like I have 5 acres. I want to make sure that property is managed correctly, and I'm moving more, as I've shared with you before, man.
Yeah.
I'm moving toward grazing it off with goats to keep it fire safe. So now I got to figure out what the goats will eat and what they won't eat.
Yeah. Well, and I love that, just the whole thing. When I hear that from this perspective, I think holistic management, or what Anna mentioned is systems management. So that conversation of how do all those things work together. That's awesome.
I'm not well versed in this subject, but I would guess infrastructure, having the utilities, the power, the internet, the water, the roads to get,
Yeah, I think that's huge. Like that was kind of what pulled up for me when you said access. My brain for access goes so many different ways, and that was one of like access to the infrastructure that actually is going to help, like that's crucial for your business. Yeah.
I think community centric. That's mainly because most of the places out here are small scale production, and we have to compete with the large scale production that happens elsewhere. And so maybe if there's a strong community identity and purpose, is a way to sustain each other.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And that's one of the things the RCD is working on, is what is our role to be that nexus? Because we don't want to be the ones leading it. We want to figure out like how do we don't even want to be the connective tissue. We just want to be the ones that say like, hey, what do you need and how can we foster that? Any other thing? Yeah.
I would echo what Frank said, but then also, and I don't know if this is so much of a value, but just like the issue point of being able to keep our agricultural land agricultural and not have it split off to 10-acre or farms, hot farms, or or large acre residential estates, that it actually stays intact, and being able to provide those landowners with financial incentives to be able to do that.
Yeah, open space is a huge one, and another issue that we've talked about is even when hobby farms and things happen, like when that happens, it's a reality in our rural counties, right? How do we help those people that are now the stewards of that land understand that that needs to be managed, and what management means for them is another huge one. I'm going to jump to maybe the challenges, or no, I'll stick with the other one. When engaging with projects and programs for natural working lands, if you guys do, is there any significant way you can think that, like, how you guys would like to see those things delivered to your communities? Maybe that you're not seeing now. All right, bust. We'll move on.
I think maybe giving some examples of what we mean by that, which is like, right now we get a grant and we have to build out a project, and then we deliver that project to the community. So in the case of California CDFA's, California Department of Food and Ag's Healthy Soils program, they've created a program. The way they've designated to deliver that program is to have technical assistance providers across the landscape go out and do outreach, and then we essentially solicit projects, we help design those projects, and then those get submitted, and then it's kind of fairly hands-off. Then it's on the producer to kind of, we can provide technical assistance in terms of helping identify the equipment that's needed, or contractors, suppliers, and things like that, but it's really on the producer to get that work done, which we know, and so here's the tricky thing, like, they want it to be multi-practice projects. Do you know how hard it is just to take on one new practice and to have to navigate the resources you need to do it, the knowledge that you need to do it, to do the grant administration on top of it, and then you got to do it for 2 practices, right? And then they want that, some practices they want done every year, right? So just thinking about when we're talking about delivery and how some of these opportunities are made available to the community, what from people's experience in this room with interacting with program delivery to your communities, like, what do you see that works, and what do you see that doesn't work? Because in that scenario, I could list 3 things that I felt didn't work.
I think one is just knowledge of the benefit, I think, is a big thing. With a lot of programs, and even just knowing that that program exists is the first step, right? As a veteran, there's many programs out there that can help me I don't know about. So that, I believe, can be shared with all other walks of life, farm workers, farmers, resource management people, whoever. Outreach, publicity of the programs is the first prime step that needs to be focused on, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I work with the East Merced RCD, so I love what you guys are doing. I'm also a landowner in Tuolumne County. And for me, like you said, so access and education, like knowing what's out there, but also hearing the success stories of what works and what my ROI might be.
Yeah.
Like, what is my return for a farmer versus just a private landowner? Like, and then what does it do in the community? How can I see the fruits of what you've done, coupled with what I've done, to then be like, hey, this worked. Let me go tell my other farm friends or landowners.
Love that.
It's a universal puzzle. I feel like in the foothills, with the work that I do with workforce development and education, like the gentleman said up front, there's so many great things that are going on, but most people don't know. Like, I still have people that don't know what Amador College Connect is, and it's been there for 12 years. Frank, you know, right? Yeah. You do what? And it's an amazing program doing a lot of great things. So it's the same with the RCD, and I know
we've been around since the 1950s,
right? And
so
RCD, what do you guys do?
Yeah.
We hear the same thing. So, and I don't know what the solution is to it, but I know we all experience this both as organizational leaders and as community members, Like, oh, I had no idea that that program, Healthy Soil Program, the bat box, we do have the bat box through you guys. So that was one great thing that we got on our properties. And now we got bats eat all the mosquitoes they eat us up in the spring. So, so something about the outreach, you know, and again, I don't know what the solution is, but making sure that everybody knows those programs are available.
Yeah, sorry, just to speak to that real quick, because I see that there's two hands up, but to speak to that, which is that by hearing this amplified across voices, we can write that into our grant, that a significant portion of what we need to be able to deliver what they want in terms of implementation is outreach. Because frequently, the outreach is meant to just be for a period of solicitation, right? Which is like maybe a couple of months, one information session, and that's what we get. And sorry, I know, because we're probably short on time, but can we get the two other perspectives?
Yeah, I'm just gonna tell you though, right? We're over time by 1 minute right now. So,
okay.
And our next thing is in 5 minutes we're gonna be doing a engagement activity over in the main room. The ag room will be closing at this point because everything's gonna be in the main room. But go ahead, be fast.
Yeah, I was going to say on the communication front, that's a problem in other certain fields essentially. In our region, there's no centralized communication source, which I've noticed for a lot of different people and groups in this program funding source. And so if there was a continued sustained way that people could go to a single location to get knowledge about when an event's happening, a workshop, outreach services, that wasn't tied to one grant, that continually got serviced and updated, and then other community programs can reach out to them like, hey, put this thing I'm having on the calendar for that thing. So if RCD could do a calendar that was online, that was perennially updated.
We are working on a resource guide, and I think figuring out how to tie it in with what's going on over here and not duplicating that effort as well. And then figuring out how to sustain it is huge. Yeah.
Frank, you had, I saw you here.
Yes, I did, but we're almost out of time. I'll be very, very, very brief, I hope. There's value in what you folks have to offer. And the problem is that people don't know, the majority of the people don't know the value that you're offering. But I mean, for instance, an awareness of, okay, we should know by now that the food system that we have, a large majority of it is junk food, it's crap. It doesn't do your body any good. I'm talking about fast food, highly processed food. So a program of awareness that you can have a small little garden in your area, whether it's container or directly in the soil. You can grow various vegetables that you use all the time, and with a certain amount of success. You have them right there, which means you're not hopping in the car to drive down to Timbuktu, if you live in rural as I do, to pick up vegetables you need for a salad or whatever else, and save yourself the cost of fuel, the wear and tear on the roads, the mileage associated with your car when you go to the insurance company. There's all these things that pull together that's associated with the quality of the ground that you have, whether it's in a pot or whether it's in the direct earth.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank.
All right, let's give Anna a round of applause.